Hey, team, welcome back to another episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader Podcast. This is your host, Mark Jewell. And today I have a really special episode on our CEO season here with Keri Carstens from Jord BioScience. And excited. Did you say Jord or Jord BioScience, Keri?
It is Jord,
Is
like
Jord
like
officially?
fjord, like
Yeah.
Norwegian.
I,
Yes, very Norwegian.
I grew up in Minnesota. I still got enough of that Norwegian left in me that
Yeah,
I, where I
yeah,
can. But Keri, excited to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
yeah. Thanks, Mark. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
You bet. All right, Keri, what does it mean for you to be intentional?
I gave some thought to this, knowing the title of your podcast, so it's a good thing I did my prep work.
Mm-hmm.
But really, when I think about being intentional as a leader, it's being purpose driven. Why are we here? And do we all know why we show up at work every day? Um, it's also about having a high functioning team. And so making sure that I have enabled them, I've hired the best, have I enabled them to be the best that they can be for their teams? And making sure that we keep our mission and our values at the forefront of what we do. So why do we show up to work every day? We're here to serve farmers in the best way we know how, which is helping to improve products. And I think it's taking that time to be sure that that's kind of embedded in everything we do each day. And I would also add that I'm a believer things happen for a reason. So there's a reason that I'm in this seat, that you're in your seat, that each of my leadership team members has curated the skills that they have over their career and ended up in the seat that they're in. We have something to offer, and there's a greater power that has put us there to serve that purpose. And that's really what I would say comes to mind when I think of intentional leadership.
Yeah, I love it. I love that you brought in purpose driven. A lot of people say it's you mean to do it, or it's deliberate, and that's certainly part of our definition, our framework for what intentional leadership looks like. But this idea of purpose driven, the word that we use in the definition now is distinct.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a distinction about it. What I mean by distinct is, yes, we all have a unique way of going about doing things, but also there's a unique reason.
Yep.
That you're in the role, and it's not futile.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Right.
passion, I think that's something that comes out in each of our team members, and it doesn't matter where they sit in the organization, what their skill sets are. They chose ag for a reason, and it's
Yeah.
because of the passion related to it.
Right. Yeah. I often say that we joke with our clients sometimes, like, listen, there's a lot easier ways to make money than working in the ag industry. So obviously you chose this for a reason.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or you're here
I
for a reason.
could not agree more. I mean, been in a number of conversations recently. Being in a startup, you end up talking to a lot of investors and other groups.
Mm-hmm.
And in the introductions, right or wrong, I'd say this is personal for me. I grew up on a farm. I still farm with my family. Yes, I have this day job, but this is personal. Bringing better products to farmers is deeply personal to me. And I kind of wear it across my forehead. And right or wrong, that's who I am and who my team are
Right.
as well.
Do you find that, does that resonate with investors when people are sitting there, money managers, capital allocators, when they're
Um,
thinking about,
I don't know if I could say it's 100% success rate
yeah.
on that, but I think the vast majority appreciate that I put it out there on the table right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, if you're going to have financial partners, you want people, I would imagine, that are aligned with what you
Yeah.
believe, right? It just makes
Yeah.
everything easy.
Makes it so much easier because when you have really tough things to talk through, you know where you stand on the easier stuff, right?
Mhm. Wonderful. Well, let's talk a little bit about you. Give us a little bit of your background and where you come from and how you got to Jord and what that means now.
Yeah, thanks. So I've been at Jord for just shy of 2 years. I came in June of 2022 to serve as Chief Operating Officer, and then had the privilege to be named CEO in February of last year. So just a little over a year being CEO, and I'm really appreciative of the team that I get to work with and the board that I have supporting our company. Really fortunate that way. Before I came to Jord, I was at Corteva Agriscience for 14 years. I came in through the pioneer side of the house. My academic background is a master's and Ph.D. in environmental toxicology with a focus on environmental risk assessment of pesticides. That's what I studied in my PhD and was hired to do for Pioneer was to lead the team of scientists that does environmental risk assessment. So all of the biotech crops have to go through a regulatory process. And that's what I did for 5 or 6 years. And then I got really curious, which is sort of a theme in my life. I think I got curious about how Pioneer was making advancement decisions about different product types. And I really wanted to understand the business better. And so I just decided to apply for a role in the program management, or what I think they would now call portfolio management, and team, and supported the soybean portfolio. So I had the opportunity to work with some great leaders across different functions in Pioneer, and eventually was asked to move from that role into a fledgling seed treatment business. So that was the time kind of right before the merger that created Corteva. Dow, prior to the Dow DuPont merger, DuPont Crop Protection and Pioneer decided to perform kind of a mix of a staff to see if we could really launch a seed treatment business. And
Okay.
one of my favorite times in my career, I spent 7 years with that team, global commercial team, building the seed treatment business. I had regulatory and integrated product responsibilities in addition to being a business partner on that leadership team, and really enjoyed both the team environment. There was a special team that was really curated to grow that business, almost performing like a startup in the bigger umbrella of the company. And I learned a ton from some of the smartest people I probably will ever have the chance to work with. And I'm grateful for that.
Very cool. That's fantastic. That is a really cool story of you wouldn't maybe normally think of somebody going from more the science background all the way through now to being a CEO of a company, but that's a real journey.
Yeah, it's probably not the norm. I do draw on my science skills quite a bit in this role, I have to say, because a lot of it is problem solving. And it's looking at data, and it doesn't matter if it's financial data or the actual data for our product development, but it's looking at data, figuring out what really matters. And also being trained in risk assessment, it helps you to sort of take calculated risks, like okay, what about this scenario? What could that outcome look like? And being able to think that through. But yeah, it's probably not the norm with most scientists. I don't know what that means for me, but yeah.
But super helpful. You're right. I mean, this is something I would love people who aren't in a CEO role or business owner role to understand. I mean, most of the time is really, I mean, even if you're doing other things, you're still, at least in the back of your mind, thinking about how to solve whether there's cash flow issues or team building or culture building issues, or, you know, where are the people going to come from as we scale the company and all. I mean, these are the problems that you're constantly in charge of. So
yeah, being able to hire great people. I mean, every single thing I worked on in my, both today in my current role, but also all of the roles prior to that, when I was at Corteva, is a team oriented. I mean, everything we do. And so also there's an aspect, I think, for scientists that is maybe counterintuitive when you're trained to be like the expert on something, to recognize that is your job, but you're not the expert on all these other things. So surround yourself with the best of the best to help drive that forward or solve that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. Well, talk to us a little bit about, you know, being in the startup world. You know, you got a growing team there, about 15 people, it sounds like, at Jord. What is great talent acquisition look like for you in that space, attracting the right people, making sure that you've got a good solid pipeline of talent to come?
Yeah, it's ongoing, something we think about all the time. But the first thing that came to mind when you asked me that, Mark, was resilience. So teaching people that change is constant, and in a startup, you have to be changing in a really rapid pace. That's part of growth and being able to get to that scale up phase. But with that comes an openness and kind of being unafraid of that change. So that's one of the first things that you kind of look for in an employee. You know, there's obvious skills that are needed, especially if they're technical roles, because we are a science-based company. So we have specific skill sets that we need to look for in team members. But, you know, are you a team player? Do you have a passion? I can't teach passion and curiosity. So do you have those two things, especially being able to work in a team? But then this resilience, this adaptation to change. And it doesn't mean that you have to love every change that we make, but that you can embrace the why and really, you know, be a great team player that way.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you prepare an individual for the iterations that you have to go through. Because I even look at my business, we're growing right now. And, we were a year ago, a couple people just making everything happen and then contracting out our work. And now within a couple of months, we'll be half a dozen,
It's
back,
exciting. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
exciting. Right.
Yeah.
And yet like, hey, listen, and you are bringing people on today and saying, in 6 months, like I need you to write down everything that you're doing and document what you're doing and how you're doing it, because I want you to think about in 6 months, you may not be doing that job anymore because we're growing. That
Yeah.
the job is going to shift and change. Somebody else may be doing your
Exactly.
6 months from now. You're going to get to train them.
Well, in fact, that's what success looks like, right? I think that what you just said is spot on, right? It's being transparent right up front to say, we are changing. So what it looks like today, I can promise you, actually, if we're successful, it's going to look different 6, 9, 12 months from now. And I think just sharing that right up front, we've tried to do that in the interview process even, but especially as we're onboarding employees to say what success looks like actually means you might have a job at first that's like this wide and this deep, but we might need you to actually go deeper and narrower on something. And that actually means we met our success goals, right? We've done the things that we needed to do to demonstrate, whether it's, scaling and demonstrate, field relevance, progress with a specific client. All of those things might mean your role changes or how we are doing things changes. And I've tried to be clear with my team too. In fact, we just had this conversation the other day because we're trying to talk about owner mindset. We have a very young staff. A lot of them, this is their first role right out of school, whether it was, a master's or a bachelor's degree or what have you. And so we're teaching them some of the ways of working, for the first time. And we're talking about owner mindset. And in that, I was trying to help them see that we will earn the right to do things, but that means we aren't doing it today, but we will be doing it later. That's part of change too. So kind of it's that carrot piece that's out in front of you, but really helping them see the vision and making sure that we're transparent as leaders.
Yeah. You just mentioned a word there that I would love for you to elaborate on for the listeners. Talk about owner mindset. What is it like? Just go a little bit deeper on that.
Yeah, it's that accountability. So making sure that every single employee feels like they own the business, like their personal money is being used to run the business, drive the business, so that when we're making choices about how we spend our time, the projects that we're working on, if we need a new piece of equipment versus something else, that we're thinking about it almost like it's our own money that we are putting into that, but also that we're owning and sharing in the wins and the lack of progress when we have it. So just trying to embed that accountability across the entire organization so people feel accountable for their decisions, and they're also thinking really hard about, is this the best use of my time? If I know what the company goals are, and what I like to use the phrase of nothing else will matter unless we achieve the following things. Like if you can't point to that day to day, that's not owner mindset. The owner mindset looks like, I know I spent my time in the best way that I could, or yes, we have to have this piece of equipment because it's going to help us go, 5 times faster than what we were doing before. Here's how I think about the cost of that kind of thing. But sharing not just in the costing part of that, but also the wins, right?
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Well, I like it. So this is, I think, aligned with the same concept and something that we're deploying in our business right now. And it started with me. Like when you're putting something together, I think those that have listened to the show, they know like we were up hockey stick up to the right, growing up until COVID. We're very event focused. We got to take a step back and kind of start everything over from the beginning, which was terrible and not fun to go through. And at the same rate, like it gave me a chance as the owner, as the leader, to sit back and think, okay, well, if I, since we're still going, if I were to do it better next time, what are some of those things that I would change? So I did a lot of extra things for the last couple of years that I wouldn't, maybe I wasn't doing in 2018 and 2019 when we were super busy and before COVID hit. So then, anyway, I read a book called 10X is Easier Than 2X by Dan Sullivan. And I don't know if you've ever read any Dan Sullivan. He's noted as having coached more entrepreneurs, business owners, CEOs than just about anybody else out there. But one of the concepts he teaches in there is the 80-20 rule. And so we can say generally about 20% of our activity is generating 80% of our results. So once you're 20% can outpace the whole of that equation when you're doing all the things, right? You need to focus on your 20% and then give somebody else the 80% and let that be theirs, right? Now let them sort of steward that. Yeah. And this is where the ownership mindset comes in. So let them take care of that. And then when they can get their 20% to outpace that, now you can add another person. Right. Or you can implement technology or process or some other way to be able to manage that. And so it gave me a framework to think about, okay, what needs to go? Yep. Because I'm doing all these other 80% activities and they're distracting from the 20%, which is costing us revenue. Yeah. Right. And because I'm not focusing my time there, and it gave me a cool framework to just start looking at and being specific about activities. I mean, one of the silly things, right, is just like looking at event sites and figuring out what's on the menu. And it's just easier to say, hey, listen, guys, the budget's 20 grand.
Somebody go figure this out.
Yeah. I don't care what we're eating. Just go.
Yeah. It's so true though. I mean, that being able to say, am I really the best person to be like, should I be spending my time on this? Am I the best and most skilled at that specific thing? Or is there someone else who's better suited for it?
Yeah. And what drains you and what gives you life, right? Yeah, we're talking about being purpose oriented. So with that, let's transition a little bit and talk about culture. I mean, you're in that startup environment. You have a little bit of an advantage over maybe a company that's been around a long time. You can really work and make that culture your jar of clay, so to speak. Yeah. But what's important to you around building intentional culture? How's that working for you guys?
Yeah, I have to say this is one of my favorite parts of my job. Really being able to shape the culture. In fact, it's something that my whole team enjoys, and we locked ourselves in a room a couple times recently for some workshops to talk about how to actually establish, mission, vision, all of that. Values though, and then how importantly, how do you live it? It's one thing to put pretty words on a slide or a poster somewhere and say, here's the type of culture that we want, or here are our values. It's an entirely different thing to change behavior and actually embed how you are going to live that. And so we spent some pretty focused time as a team talking about that, and both reflecting on, because each of my leadership team comes from a very different background, and be able to share from their previous lives, like what were some of the great things that they wanted to bring forward and ways that they saw this work, and what were some of the failure points. And I think in the end, it's really no different than business, setting business goals or business strategy. What you are measuring is what you will deliver on. And so we've actually tried to put in metrics for culture, which sounds odd in some ways, right? But it's not. It's no different than the way that you want to, create a safety culture or something like that. You have to start measuring and knowing where you stand and where you want to go. And so for us, it was really about, we said we want to be results driven. What does that look like? How do we actually behave that way? And so we have implemented, a specific way of setting performance goals for individuals, and then measuring progress on that. And we're trying to take kind of the best of what we all learned in other other places that we worked. And then what does that look like now versus 1 or 2 years from now? If we are growing in the way if we continue to track and we're going to add staff, how do we think about, is that scalable? Is what we're doing today in the behavior change scalable when we are twice as the size that we are now? But it's really about having people who embrace that culture and the values and want to live it. So it goes into your hiring and who you have on your staff, but also the processes and tools you put in place, and then the metrics and rewards, all of that. It's no different than, creating a great sales executing force. It's the same sort of thing.
Yeah, I like this. So you said something in here that's really interesting. Well, there's two things that I want people to pull out. One is actually having culture metrics. Right. So we actually we sat down, we've decided, okay, this is what our culture gets to look like results driven being one of those components. I'm sure there are other descriptors, right? But results driven being one of those. So what does that look like? What does success look like as a results driven company? So actually having metrics defined around that. So that alone, guys, I mean, that's one thing that you can just take and start to sit down with your executive teams and leadership groups and think, okay, what are the metrics that we're actually measuring inside the culture? But then also taking a forward look and saying, hey, if we're going to grow or there's going to be potential change in the industry or whatever, what does that look like 2 years from now, maybe a few years down the road? I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
Like
I really don't view it any different than how we approach other parts of, business strategy, business goals, and executing that. It's the same thing applied to culture. If you say you care about fill in the blank, results driven or transparent communication with employees, whatever that, those core values are that are part of your culture, then what does that look like and how are you going to measure that you're actually doing it?
right. Yeah. Super important. I love it. I love that a lot. And we've had a lot of answers around culture. Talked to a lot of people about culture. It's one of the things that we specifically go to work on with our clients a lot, and kind of it's 3 different buckets that we work with them on, culture being one. And a lot of times they're surprised, right, when they start to see certain things show up, which means like we weren't really intentional in thinking about what are those things. So we're actually doing setting intentional goals around culture and then going to work on that just like you would any other business initiative. So
yeah, love it. It's so needed.
yeah, that's I love it. Are all the coffee cups at Jord BioScience? Do they all look like beakers?
No, so
Yeah.
unfortunately, 2 of my favorite mugs are in the dishwasher, so that's the one I
Oh,
grabbed.
fun.
I was like, this is
I
maybe
thought
not
maybe
the
it was,
best choice.
it's the Jord
But I
BioScience.
am
I thought maybe
embracing the scientist in
it's
me.
part of the
It's one of
culture.
my favorite mugs. But everybody needs a quirky mug like that, I think.
Everybody needs one. I have one that I got when we were skiing in Colorado this last December. I was out there with my wife. My wife loves to ski at Winter Park. Specifically, we like to ski Mary
Beautiful
Jane.
area. Yeah.
Yeah, we love to ski the trees. And so I bought a mug while I was out there. Very expensive mug. It was like $25 for a coffee mug. But I bought a mug that says no pain, no Jane. And what this means to me, right, is like when I put in the work and generate the results, my results driven, nature is that I get to, continue to take my wife on a ski trip once a year to go out and ski Mary
There you
Jane.
go.
It's a motivator for me every time I'm drinking coffee from
Yeah.
the no Jane mug, right? Because we go out there and I see how happy she is. Like I ski because she skis, not because I love to ski. I mean, I do enjoy skiing. I would go skiing without her, but this is her passion. And so, it's motivating to me to think about, okay, if I put in the work, put a little extra, a few extra sales calls here and there, a little extra grind, then there's going to be that budget available to take her skiing, right?
That's right. The reward that comes after all that hard work.
You bet. What's over the course of your career, what's been one of those big hurdles that you've had to overcome?
Yeah, I don't know if I could come up with just one. So I kind of think about this maybe a little bit different. So
yeah,
you've probably already figured out I'm maybe not the norm here. So forgive me if this is cheesy, but I was a hurdler in college. So whenever I have somebody ask me about hurdles in life or career or something like that, I can't help but like revert back to what are the 2 big things you should never do as a hurdler. One is stutter step, and the other is to have flailing arms. If you've ever been to a middle school track meet, you see both of those things, and it's like super painful to watch, right? The stutter step of kind of shuffling up to get over the hurdle. And, each of those things, really, those behaviors that come out are related to lack of confidence. And so if I think about metaphor of the career, right? But having the confidence to say what needs to be said or to take the action that needs to be taken, even if it's not the most popular thing. I think that for me, kind of coming to those realizations in my career has been probably the theme. If I had to, talk about the biggest hurdle, it would probably come back to that. So having the confidence in knowing something needs to be said, something needs to be done or acted upon, even if it's not maybe the easy answer, it's the right one, and just going for that and knowing, sticking to your values, sticking to what if if you've got your North Star about both your values and the goals that you have set, whether it's for your team or an organization, you can't go wrong by doing those things. And so I think that, so forgive me for the weird metaphor of stutter stepping and flailing arms, but it really does come down to that, I think.
I mean, fun fact, you're actually the second hurdler in the CEO season that I've had.
Love it. I love it.
And I can't remember exactly. I know there's another great metaphor that was pertaining to hurdling in the last one. So
that's funny.
But I think it's great. Now there's something there's some gold in here that I want to pull out, and I'm sure you've seen this, but maybe is just for me. So the stutter stepping, the flailing arms, right? We would, see that. I mean, that's something that's observable, but maybe the distinction we wouldn't make is that's directly correlated to a lack of confidence. And we all have different things that we do that, whether it's physical or not, that would be an expression of a lack of confidence. Right. If you're growing and you're pushing yourself beyond something, like I'm in a big season right now of moving into a space of learning to do new things. You put me in a classroom, you put me on a stage, you give me a microphone, I know what to do. No problem. I've got my 10,000 hours. Like that's not hard for me. Right. But you put me at a new level of running a business. We're not just growing a little $1 million company anymore. We're growing a $25 million company. Well, I've never done that. That's a new skill set for me to learn. Right. And so I'm putting myself out there. So I would imagine if you were a seasoned veteran CEO watching me do this thing, you'd probably see some flailing arms and some stutter steps going on, in the Mark Jewell life right now.
Yeah. It's so true. And I think it does come down to there's underneath that is like, whether it's the fear of failure, the fear of letting down some people that we care about, whatever that looks like, but it's having the confidence to do the right things and say what needs to be said, and to know that learning is part of it.
You bet. Yeah. I love that. All right. Well, what's been a big win?
Big win. My team. No, there's no hesitation on that. I mean, I like probably a lot of people that you talk to, you could point to different projects or, I can think of registrations that we achieved that no one thought were possible. I could look at, some of those things, but really in the end, it's been the people that I've worked with. And specifically today in this role, it's the leadership team I've built. I mean, they are phenomenal. They are diverse. I would put them against any leadership team in the industry. And that's probably a really big statement to make, but I have a really outstanding leadership team they test each other, they push each other, but they support each other. At the end of the day, we all know why we show up each day and what we're here to do. And I would say is my biggest win, is putting together such a great team. I'm so blessed that way.
Yeah. I love it. I love it a lot. All right. What are you reading, listening to? What would you recommend others be taking?
Yeah. So maybe a controversial title, but it's one of my favorite books, and I listen to his podcast as well. So Mark Manson, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F.
Yeah.
Not a great title, but is a great book.
Yeah.
I think about this for two key reasons, because it really is about applying strategy to your life. So the strategic choices, making active choices about what you do and do not care about. It's a fast read, but he also has some great follow-up in his podcast that he does, some great guest speakers and things like that. And I think what resonated most with me is the making active choices of what I do not care about in my life. So I'll use like a really kind of simple answer. I don't care about having a really nice, expensive, or clean car. I live on gravel in central Iowa. We live on a farm. I will never have a clean car, inside or outside. I have 3 kids. Like it's not going to happen. So do I spend any mental energy or dollar signs worrying about that? Nope. If people want to judge me for a dirty car, fine. They're probably not my people then anyway. And that's okay with me. And but like, that's one example. It's a very minor example of how, like the things that you can choose to spend your time and energy on, and the things that you shouldn't and won't. And everybody's going to have a different answer for that. For someone else, it might be really important to them, and there's probably a good reason for it. But I think it's really about where, then if you've made these strategic choices, it's like giving yourself the permission of where you will and won't spend your energy and your kind of thought space. So that to me is why I really have enjoyed that book and that podcast.
Yeah. Well, great recommendation. Yeah. Mark Manson, Subtle Art of Not Giving a Flip, and you can insert your other F word there because I want to keep the explicit sign off my podcast.
Yeah. I don't want that
but,
for you either.
Yeah. Well, it's not that I'm like offended by the word or anything like that. It's just, it's extra work to have to go and click another button when you submit it to Apple.
Yeah.
It's like one step we can eliminate by not having.
Yes.
Anyway, and I really like that. This is where you went with that, actually. Not, the great recommendation, but also like where you went with it, because I mean, a lot of us just give a lot of extra mental energy to things that don't truly matter, that aren't really impacting your overall results. There's a quote, and this actually came up in the book you and I were talking about it before we hit record. Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara, which I recommend for everybody as well. And his, and this is not his quote, but I just read it in the book. It says, "How I do one thing is how you do everything. How you do one thing is how you do everything." Now, I get the intention behind the quote, but I disagree, because what I do believe is true is how I do one thing is how I'm capable of doing anything. So there are certain things that I just do really, really well. And I am capable of doing really, really well at just about anything, because I know I'm capable. I know what excellence looks like. And at the same rate, I also feel that there are things that I just don't care. Right? Where I just don't care, because you can paint yourself into a corner, drive yourself crazy, having to achieve excellence at every single little thing. And by the way, we run in our coaching programs and my wife's coaching programs. I know we run into a lot of people who are so wrought with anxiety that they can't move forward because everything's not perfect.
Yeah. And you can't have that, especially in startup world. I've learned that part. You can't worry about the level of perfection. It's also not necessary. It's not necessary. There's very few things that have to be perfect. Sometimes good enough is even above what you need.
Right. Well, one of my things that I observe politics, but I don't get triggered by politics. At the end of the day, I mean, I don't, would I have a preference over who's going to be president? Sure. But it doesn't really impact my business that much. And I mean, we're in the ag industry. At the end of the day, the ag industry is going to go. It sort of has its own economic bubble that's impacted by the rest of the world, but also in some ways separate from the rest of the world. So if the real estate market is crashing, guess what? Farmers are still planting corn.
We always have to eat, right?
So we have our own little, something like, I'm going to focus on what I can control, right? Which is, I'm going to focus on doing great training programs for our ag retail companies and our manufacturers and the companies that serve them. And that's the thing that I can do. And if I do that well, if I just focus on putting more value into the industry than I take out, it's one of the reasons we do this podcast, is just put value in, just put more in than I take out, then we're probably going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to spend a lot of time worrying about, all this,
factors we can't control. Right. And I think there's so much to be said for, not spending the energy in, whether it's negativity or positivity, both are contagious. So choosing to focus on and surround yourself with both the people and the things you have control over that you can make positive and keep positive, that's what you should be spending energy on. That
is a fantastic way to put that right there. Really good line. Rewind 15 seconds, guys, and just hit the little back button for 10 seconds twice real quick on your Spotify and re-listen to that. So good stuff. Keri, as we bring this in for a landing, any last thoughts or things that you'd love to share with the world about, your thoughts on intentional leadership or the company?
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, maybe go back to that. Positivity is contagious. So thinking about how you use that with your team, it doesn't mean everything's always sunshine and roses. Like, we know that, but things happen for a reason. So how do you find that silver lining? How do you find the reason maybe something didn't go right? How do we learn from it? And quickly, just that resilience of adapting and learning. But but also coming back to what's the positive out of it. Even in a situation where things didn't go as planned, how do we find the positive from it? That and bringing that to your team will always serve you well. I think that's one of the main lessons that I've learned, and I'm trying to live that every day too. So we are in sort of a tough market relative to venture capital money for startups, especially for ag tech. I don't think I'm saying anything that anyone would disagree with there.
Yeah.
But how do you use that? How do you use that time to both be really smart with how you're spending your money, teach your team owner mindset? How do you learn every time you have a conversation with a group and get better every time, even if you don't have control. I don't have control over venture capitalists, and I never will, and that's okay. But I can learn from it every time and just be really smart with the decisions that we make. And on the same time, celebrating wins is something that I'm trying to focus on for my team. They have so many in a week. Sometimes I feel like I have my head down like a bulldozer and we're just moving forward. And I want to take the time to like stop the bulldozer, look up for a little bit and focus on, wow, you guys, you just 10x'd in like 2 weeks what we were doing for our output in this experiment space. Like, wow, how did you do that? So really celebrating and coming back to that positivity, even if there's things that are not overall something you can control.
Wow. Keri, I feel like this has been a real privilege to get to sit down with you for a while this morning and chat about this. You can
Likewise.
hear the intention in your voice. I appreciate it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a lot of fun.